We now come to one of the most useful functions in Sage Accounting, which is the recurring invoices. You will basically go to customers, transactions, customer recurring invoices. And here you will say add recurring invoice. So when do we use a recurring invoice? If you invoice the same people every month, recurring invoices could be a very useful way for you to do this. Now, you either have one of two situations. You invoice the same people the same amounts every month, or you invoice the same people every month for the same items or more or less the same items, and then you create, but the amounts might differ. So what I'm going to show you is a typical situation where you have a retainer kind of situation where you invoice the same people for the same amounts. But if you have a situation where you invoice the same people for more or less the same services, my suggestion would be to create a recurring invoice for all the services that could possibly be on the monthly invoice. And then you can just delete the lines that are not applicable and then change the amounts every month and then issue the invoices. Otherwise, you can just check the amounts. What I do is I do keep an Excel list of the retainers that I have to invoice every month, that I have a list to check my recurring invoices against, because sometimes a client would stop, or the amount would change, or something would change from one month to another, and you don't always remember to change it on the recurring invoice, and that would basically be your reminder. So I would recommend that, to just make sure that you don't have unnecessary debtors queries, and that you are sure that the amounts that you've invoiced is correct. Okay, so you can either create a recurring invoice from this screen, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You'll basically choose your client, and as Astronautical at this stage is my only client, they will get a recurring invoice. There's automatically a number that's allocated to that. Again, you can attach or allocate a sales rep to that specific invoice. Your reference, remember that your reference, you preferably want everything on this recurring invoice to be applicable to every single month. So here you won't say July, but you would say rather retainer, that they know what you are invoicing them for. And you can rather have a situation where you have to figure out which month's retainer we are talking about from the date of the invoice. Here you're going to, if there's a discount that's applicable every month, you're going to put it in here. You can again choose your your layout, and you can put in a delivery address if that's applicable. Right, your start date is going to be the first date of your first recurring invoice. Now here's the snag. If I want to issue my first recurring invoice today, which is the 17th of the 6th, I cannot do that, because the first date for a recurring invoice is the 18th of the 6th, which is tomorrow. So unless you are willing to wait until tomorrow, for the first month, you would rather then issue a normal invoice. So I'm going to show you now how I do my recurring invoices, and then you know how your invoice got to you. Okay, frequency, beware. It defaults on every day. Now, there might be some situations where you can invoice a client every day. I don't think it happens that often. So in my case, it's every month, but you can also every year, every 6 months, third month, second month. You've got various options here. So mine is every month. And then if there's an end date, so you only have that many recurring invoices that you want to run, you can put in an end date here. Mine is open-ended, but I know that if a person, let's say they are paying off a website design over 12 months, you're going to basically take the 12 months and divide it into 12 portions, and then they're going to pay their last portion here. Um, if you have more than one recurring amount for a client and they run on different timelines, so some have an end date or they have different end dates assigned, create a separate recurring invoice for each timeline. So if there's a portion that runs every month and it makes sense to combine them on a invoice, you can put them on one recurring invoice. But if they have separate end dates or separate schedules, son, divide them into separate recurring invoices. Okay, again, your terms you're going to state here. And then you've got two options when you create the invoice. When this date arrives, it's going to perform one of two actions. The first one, it's going to create an invoice as a draft, or it's going to create it automatically and send it out to the customer. I don't like the automatically, because if you want to check it and you just want to make sure that it's correct, you do not necessarily want that, but in some circumstances that might be the better option to use. So these are the two options that you have available. Then for email distribution, here you can say who do you want to send it to. If you want to change this, you can see I can click here, but it doesn't allow me to choose the email address here. You will actually have to go into your customer and then change the address there, and then it will automatically insert it here. Automatic invoices, you will be asked, do you want to automatically CC somebody, when that automatic invoice is sent? And here you can choose which email signature you want to use for this specific recurring invoice. You can use inclusive amounts. I'm going to use that now. And here again, you can choose items, you can choose item bundles, or you can choose the account. Okay, so let me choose, I'm going to set up a new item here just to, okay, it's taking a little bit of time. Still thinking about it. Let me pause until this thinking has wrapped up. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to say, I'm going to set up an item that I'm going to call monthly, and I'm going to call it monthly groceries. And that will also fall under my category groceries, and that is a service. I'm not going to have a specific opening cost because that's probably going to differ for each client. And the unit, I'm going to make each. Okay. It's an active item. I've got VAT on my sales, I've got VAT on my purchase, and I'm going to put in exclusive selling prices or of any kind, because this is an item that I think will differ from client to client. So there's not a set price. Okay, so there's monthly groceries, and I've got just one of that, and my price for this specific client is 550 Rand, standard VAT, no discount for this client, and this is the invoice that they're going to get every single month. Again, you can change your default messages here, and then you've got an invoice. Okay, so that is the one way to set up a recurring invoice. Now you will see that there was no option to email this specific invoice, because this is basically a schedule of an invoice that is going to run. So the moment this it runs, then it's going to create an invoice that you will then send. If you want to see whether there's any draft invoices, you can click here. When you log in, you will also see that there's a message that will tell you if you've got draft invoices. It will actually list all the invoices here, and you can say yes, skip. You can tick the ones that you want to send. You will see it's very user-friendly, and then you can process an email, or you can just process it without actually emailing it to the clients. Right. So that's the one way of creating a recurring invoice. The other way of creating an invoice is to go to an invoice that you've already created. So you will go to the actual invoice that you've created. and you will say, this invoice I want to actually I want to make a recurring invoice of this specific invoice that I've created. I don't see an option where I can actually, I think I have to go into the invoice if I remember correctly. Okay, it's still thinking a little bit. Okay, there. Create recurring invoice. So what I will do now is I will basically look, it will take that invoice that I've created, and it will put it into the same format as the recurring invoice that we've just worked with, and then you will just change it that it is of such a nature. So you can say monthly grocery order, and you can choose the, or let's say this is a weekly grocery order. We've already got the monthly one. Weekly grocery order, and we say we want this one to run every week. There's no end date, and we're not going to give them 14 days to pay on a weekly grocery order. We're going to say days from date of invoice. Let's say we make it 2. And this one you don't actually want to do as a draft. We want to do it automatically, just because we can. And we check the details here. If we want a different email signature, we're going to choose it here, and it's going to send them snacks, 100 snacks at that price with utensils, and this is the way it's going to happen. And we're going to save that recurring invoice. The first one will run tomorrow. So that's how we do recurring invoices, and this is to me one of the most useful functions of Sage Accounting.